There is no sign of the Houthis giving up their attacks, the Iranian-funded Houthis giving up their attacks on ships, including British ships in the Red Sea. They've signalled today they will continue with these attacks because they say it's an act of self-defence, and quite why we thought a couple of strikes from the Americans and the Brits would end the whole problem when the Saudis have been attacking and bombing the Houthis for the last 8 years is beyond me. But where do we go from here? And what do we do? Because there's talk of us sending one of our 2 great carriers from Southampton Water. Well, I'm very pleased to be joined by Lieutenant General Jonathon Riley, retired British Army officer, military historian. The Houthis are well dug in, well organised. They can't just be taken out, can they?
Well, indeed, we and others have been having a go at them for decades. The British conducted a campaign in what was then the Aden Protectorate back in the 60s against very similar people.
Yeah.
They are very religious, very well motivated. Of course, they're now extremely well armed. They have a great barrage of Iranian-supplied weaponry, plus what they took from the Yemeni government. They have very harsh terrain, which is very remote, and just finding them is a challenge. But before you ever strike them, the Saudis, of course, spent a long time attacking them, relying almost entirely on American intelligence to do so. And I suppose you could argue that the Saudis just didn't have enough intelligence and just didn't do it big time enough or for long enough.
But it's never easy, is it?
It's never,
to fight. You know, if you have an army in the field against you in a different coloured uniform, or ships at sea, and you know what, or fighter planes, you know what the enemy is.
Yeah.
When you have an enemy, you know, mixed in with a civilian population, living, as you say, in rough terrain, it's very, very hard. I'm assuming that this goes on for a very long time.
Well, it either goes on for a long time or we do what the Saudis did, which was to make a deal with Iran. However, that looks a bit tricky. I mean, the Saudis are in almost impossible position. The Houthi attacks are damaging the investments they're making in tourism in the Red Sea, and they're damaging their trade infrastructure there. But if they strike the Houthis, they're lining up with Israel. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't.
That isn't going to happen. Jonathan, you know, we are there with the Americans, and it's often the Brits and Americans that do get stuck in.
Yep.
The French, of course, want nothing to do with any of it. Should we send one of our carriers? We've got these 2 carriers in Southampton Water, built at a cost to the British taxpayer of a stunning £6 billion. Should we send one? And if we do, just how vulnerable would they be?
Yeah, well, you know, I have to put my hand. I'm not a naval officer, but I personally couldn't understand the logic of doing that at a time when we were backing away from expeditionary operations and refocusing on Europe. Why do you need an expeditionary air capability? But we've got it, and in a sense, it's use it or lose it. And in order to pay for and man those, we've disposed of almost everything else. So if it is sent,
explain what you mean by that. You said we've disposed of everything else. Explain to the audience what you mean.
To find the money for the carriers and to find the crews for the carriers, we had to reduce from plus of 20 frigates and destroyers to 8 or 9 and about 9 submarines. So what that means is that the package that has to go with an aircraft carrier is going to be tricky to find. And even if the ships can be found, the crews are going to be tricky to find. You can't send an aircraft carrier on its own.
Unprotected.
It has to have a package of capabilities of air defence, electronic warfare, anti-submarine and so on. Specialised ships. And do we have these? Can we man them? Are we going to be relying on an American package? We're certainly going to be relying on American aircraft. We don't have the squadrons to put on the aircraft carriers. They're nowhere near operational capability just yet. So these are big things.
I think given everything you've just said, my instinct would be it would be madness and very dangerous to send one of our carriers.
It would be very high risk. And you take a risk if you need to do so to fulfill the mission, and if you can stand the consequence of failure.
And in general, the Americans, of course, they've just had 3 service personnel killed. They've had 34 injured, some of them very seriously. And a huge debate here. What should the Americans do? You know, the hawkish members of the Senate saying we've got to hit Iran, hit the mainland hard. Others saying, well, actually, you know, the Iranians may be sponsoring Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis, but they're not directly involved in this. All that would do is to provoke greater conflict in the region, and even Saudi Arabia, not going soft, but not encouraging America to hit the mainland. If you were an American, if you were an American general sitting in a meeting trying to decide how to respond to 3 of your service personnel being killed, what do you think you would do?
What I would say is that you can't reward bad behaviour. You can't leave bad behaviour unpunished, and there have to be consequences. But these consequences have to be proportionate. So a massive attack on the Iranian mainland in response to the very regrettable death of 3 servicemen and the wounding of others, is that proportionate? It could lead to a regional or even a wider global war. Does what the Houthis did justify that? Even though Iranian fingerprints are all over it, they didn't necessarily give the orders. They supplied the wherewithal and then said, go out there and make trouble. But they didn't say do that.
So you would urge?
I would always urge caution, sleep on it, have a long, hard think, rely on good multi-source intelligence and select a target that is proportionate and that will hurt and is in keeping with what was done.
Meanwhile, British merchant shipping and others will continue to be attacked in the Red Sea.
Yeah, adding a week of transit, 3,000 miles to the trade route and all the costs that go with it. Indeed.
Jonathon Riley, thank you for coming in. I have a feeling, folks, this one is going to run and run. There is going to be no quick, rapid solution to any of this.